before you
Yes.
go on, can I interrupt? Because
Go.
actually Postgres is currently on the front page of Hacker News today. And that's great. That's exactly what we want for the community tools that we use within Supabase. So if anyone is a Hacker News reader, then feel free to go and give it an upvote or drop a comment.
Yes, that's fabulous. Go and do that now. And actually, on that, once you've finished doing that, what you can do is, and we actually want to talk about the studio today, Supabase Studio. So it is the dashboard that you know if you have used the hosted product, and it is now available and open source. So if you see the tweet up there, we got a feature to go on that now. Go to Product Hunt, and ideally upvote and help us make this trending. And really, this is what Launch Week is all about. Launch Week is about basically launching a new thing every day of the week, and it originated from kind of the Y Combinator day. So if you're familiar with Y Combinator and how all of that works, at the end, sort of after 3 months, there is demo day. And demo day, you present to your whole cohort and potential investors. And so it's sort of this hyped up time sort of deadline that you need to hit and ship something and present something. And once kind of we came out of the YC cohort, we sort of wanted to maintain that spirit of having kind of that deadline. And instead of just doing one launch, we sort of decided, okay, why not have a launch every day of the week? And that's really what Launch Week is all about. And so today we're on day 2 of Launch Week, and it is all about the dashboard, which is now an open source dashboard for your Postgres database. So you could use that with any of your Postgres databases locally or wherever you might host them. And more importantly, we also want to make this interactive and have some sort of Q&A. So if you do the Super Launch Week hashtag, use that and tweet your questions at us. And then what we can do is we can put the questions at the top of the space, and we can sort of ask them. Well, you ask them, and then we can answer them throughout the space. So that's what we want to do. Super Launch Week, SUPA, of course. And then, yeah, we're looking forward to your questions, and we'll have them here in the space. Okay, I think that is all the mechanics. And with that, I actually want to stop speaking a little bit and introduce you to the folks who actually did the work, because I'm mainly talking. And so to introduce you, let's do a big round of applause if you're at home, or in your car, wherever you are. And we have Johnny, Joshin, Hugh can't make it today on the space, but we'll have Johnny or someone introduce them. And then we'll do Ant and Koppel, our co-founders. And I have a little icebreaker for each of you. So, why have you chosen to work at Supabase? And let's maybe kick off with Johnny.
Hi, everyone. I hope everyone can hear me, because I have a feeling my headphones are going to run out of battery. But yeah, I'm Johnny. I've basically been working at Supabase for about a year. And the reason I actually asked to join Supabase, or maybe begged to join Supabase, is I was using Firebase at my last startup, which I was the CTO at. And basically, we got to a point where we could have really done with a relational database. We had all the classic problems of kind of scaling up with a NoSQL database, and just having kind of like auth policies and things like that would have been just so much easier to build the project that we were working on. So rather than using Supabase using Supabase at that project, instead I jumped ship and wanted to work on Supabase full time. So I asked Ant and Koppel to let me on board, and it's been a thrill. It's been great so far.
Brilliant. Joshin, do you want to take over?
Yeah, so hey everyone, Joshin here. Uh, Been at the Supabase team for about a year and a half. So a bit of a backstory. I've known Couple for a couple of years now. Back then, I was working with him in KL, Malaysia for a year before I started uni back here in Singapore. So we caught up one day at a cafe along with some old colleagues from the same company in KL, where he was sharing about a new startup that he was building. And I mean, I'll be honest, I was still fairly fresh as a developer being an undergraduate, so I barely appreciated the terms getting thrown around like Postgres, instant RESTful APIs, or real-time data. That is until I tried using his tech for one of my college projects. Well, didn't really get good grades for that, but what struck me was how easy it was to set up my backend, and I was like, dang, this is pretty cool. So a couple of months after, couple reached out to see if I was free to help out a little on the front end, and I just couldn't pass on that chance for two main reasons. So one, I experienced firsthand how making existing technology easier to use is effective for developers, and I was really keen to be a part of that. And two, of course, I like Nicki Minaj. So I hopped on part-time while in uni and eventually joined full-time after graduating.
It's the soundtrack to all our work, Nicki Minaj.
Exactly. Yeah.
Definitely. Maybe I can just introduce also Hugh, who couldn't make it today. Hugh was the other member of the front end team at Supabase, and he was also one of the first hires as well, either number one or number two. And the funny story about Hugh is when me and Koppel created the very first version of Supabase, we went round to Hugh's office. He was working as a front end engineer at a startup that we knew well in Singapore, and we took that Stripe approach of, well, if you just show up at the office and you basically install the technology for the person, then they've got no choice but to try it out and give you some early feedback. And so we were trying to get Hugh as our very first user and our very first customer. And we showed him Supabase. In fact, we actually still had the Postgres credentials for that company's database because we'd both done some contracting there before. So we actually hooked it all up for him and then put it in front of him and said, what do you think? And he was kind of like, yeah, this is great. But then he didn't become the first user. He then became basically the first employee because he, sort of said, well, this is quite cool. I'd be interested in like helping contribute to this. And so, some of the very first commits, which you will have hopefully now be able to see in the dashboard repo. From Hugh, he helped build a lot of the SQL editor that is there. He helped in a major refactoring of the table view as well. So yeah, obviously sad that Hugh can't be here today.
I think actually it's quite possible that Joshin is now the largest contributor to Supabase because I'm pretty sure he migrated over, and so his name is tagged against every single commit.
Oh, there we go.
Is that true, Joshin?
Yeah, I think it's like 50,000 lines of code in one PR. I take that in my stride, yeah.
Thanks, Joshin.
And it was all done in one sitting, right? 50,
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Okay, so no history, but nevertheless the code is still there. Yeah, and for me, for those of you who don't know me, I'm the CTO and co-founder at Supabase. And my story of kind of like why I when Koppel sort of told me about the idea, like why I was so interested, was one of the first things we did was we went and we interviewed a bunch of our friends who were CTOs, and we asked them, what database do you use? And they all, well, actually, sorry, we asked them, the first question was, what's your favorite database? And the majority of people said Postgres. There was a few MySQLs, there was a few Neo4j, some random other databases, but the majority was Postgres. And then we said, well, what do you use in your company? And most of them said Firebase. And it's like, well, your favorite database is Postgres. Like, why do you choose Firebase? And for a lot of the people, it was about the dashboard. It was about, well, you just log in, you click a button, you get a database, and then you get to see the data in a tree. You can click around. And so it was clear to us that like this dashboard experience would be on top of Postgres, like a huge value add, and would solve that particular problem for quite a lot of startup CTOs and just developers in general. So that's why I was one of the many reasons I was so keen to give this a go.
Then for me, well, I think the original question was why do I work at Supabase? And I guess the obvious answer is because it's really what I've wanted to build for a long time. But yeah, I mean, the origin story, I won't rehash it now because I think the day deserves to be spent talking about the dashboard. But yeah, basically, I was also using Firebase, and we ended up implementing some of the tech that we use within Supabase. And then I actually reached out to Ant and kind of pitched him this idea. Actually, I think it was called Backstack or something when I pitched it to you. There was this placeholder name, and I gave Ant a pitch deck. I kind of pitched him like you'd pitch a VC, and I pitched him that we'd even go to YC, Y Combinator, and we'd build this tech startup. So I think, yeah, that's kind of the early days. And yeah, we really did spend a lot of those times, like Ant said, going around chatting to a lot of developers and finding out what they use, what they want, what is really important for them. And then, yeah, the dashboard was, of course, one of those things. But I think as you'll hear, we're going to talk about this at some stage today. I think you'll hear initially we thought it was just kind of a launching of the database or a connecting to the database and some of the tools around it. So the dashboard, well, I think, Thor, you've got it on the agenda for today. So maybe I won't dig into it soon. But yeah, it sort of did evolve quite quickly, basically when we started getting traction. So let's leave that for later.
Awesome. Sounds good. Yeah, brilliant. Well, actually, maybe one question that's just on my lips, and we'll dive into the dashboard in a second. How did Paul and Ant, how did you know each other?
We actually came to Singapore, both of us, for an accelerator called Entrepreneur First, which is kind of, they put 100 entrepreneurs in a room together, and you effectively speed date all the other founders and start something new. And then if they like your idea and your team, then they'll invest some money and you can turn it into a startup. And the funny thing was, me and Koppel were in the same batch, but we worked on different things with different people, but we ended up living together in a house with Johnny and a few other people who were in this cohort at the time. And then that's where the magic kind of really happens, right? Is like after hours having a beer and you're just discussing like tons and tons of crazy, weird and wonderful startup ideas, like lots of different technical projects. We did a few hackathons together. So, the relationship was formed there. And then, that's why once Koppel had shared the initial sort of early version of Supabase on GitHub and Hacker News, it was kind of like a no-brainer then to say, well, let's just give this a go and see where we can take it.
That's pretty awesome. And I mean, it's only been, very little time, not even 2 years, right? So that's pretty amazing. All right, let's not swell in history. Let's look at the present day. So the Supabase Studio is now open source. The dashboard that if you're a user of the hosted platform, you've been using and hopefully loving for a while. But let's get the obvious question out of the way first. Why hasn't it already been open source?
Yeah, actually, Ant and I were rehashing this today because it actually took, a bit of going down memory lane. But yeah, I think is kind of the point that I said at the start. At the start, we really thought that people just wanted to launch the Postgres database very fast and get it up and running, kind of like Firebase where you would just launch it. But I think it's kind of one of these things, and this we detail in the blog post, that once developers start using something, really using it, then they give you a million bits of feedback, and it's not till they've really discovered what's missing that they give you that feedback. So the dashboard started from a very easy UX DX way of developing for Ant and I. in a mono repo, which was closed with all our platform code. And then from there, they started requesting SQL editors and table editors and, table editors that look like Airtable, a whole bunch of things. Yeah, I mean, and I can't think of anything else. But I remember, and in the early days, we were even discussing, the React code and should we use hooks? It was right when React hooks was coming out. Should we use hooks or class functions? So the code was just a mess because we couldn't even decide, if we did open source it, what it should be. It's all JavaScript. So yeah, basically I made a real mess of the dashboard at the start, and to open source it would probably be embarrassing if we just open source it straight away. So yeah, that's probably largely my fault.
All right, fair enough. So, well, I mean, I guess now it is open source, and generally there are kind of different open source strategies. Some companies they sort of open source a spec down version of what they use internally, or release the whole thing and actually use that as their own product. So maybe you can tell us sort of which approach did we settle for, and why did we chose that? And maybe Johnny, do you want to give us some insight into that?
Yeah, I think some others want to chime in on this as well. But to give an idea, we basically kind of looked at like a few different kind of open source companies already out there, like kind of like Sentry was one of them, which was kind of like a big inspiration. But we spent kind of a few weeks like trying out a lot of different approaches because no approach that we saw that another company was doing was kind of the one way of doing it. It's like, oh, that's it. That's the way of doing it. And we tried all sorts of things like GitHub submodules, using kind of like GitHub actions to kind of copy code over, along with like GitHub Git history and things like that. But the approach that we did settle for in the end, which I think we'll end up talking about more later on, is we actually just open sourced the entire of the front end, including kind of things that are also to do with kind of our hosted platform, which is you can probably guess it's things like billing and like and multiple organizations and things like that. Like just in the end, we just thought, well, let's just put it all public. Everyone will be able to see it. Everyone can work on it. And that was kind of the approach we went with in the end.
Nice. Anyone else sort of any recap there? So it's practically like a lot of the other projects that we're using, where it is basically just open source projects that everyone collaborates on, and we actually just take that and deploy it for our own platform needs. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's pretty much it. So, and it's also, I think it's worth pointing out because, we had the question quite a lot, like, it can't be that hard to open source the dashboard, but of course, running a hosted platform and the code, there's a lot of sort of things that you don't want to open source for security reasons, or it's just not relevant. So basically abstracting out or pulling out some of the platform code, hiding it behind APIs, putting feature flags in for things that work and don't work. That's the tricky thing. But the way that, the front end team, Johnny and Josh and Hugh have done it is now pretty neat because, we get a lot of, bug reports on the front end. And before, it would be largely up to the front end team to sort of migrate even the bug reports into our main repository, our private one that we use for our platform, and then they would work on them there. And now that it's in the main repository, the bug reports can immediately be solved in that repository by anyone. And then from there, we have basically a bunch of GitHub workflows that deploy. As soon as it merges into master, it goes to our staging environment. And then from there, we push it to another branch called Studio, and the GitHub workflows just deploy it into production. So it's really the same sort of setup that you would use for any company, basically. But even though we're open source, there's no difference really, which is quite cool.
Nice. Yeah.
Sorry, and actually just a quick shout out to Sentry as well, because Sentry kind of like did a similar thing where they try to open source a part of their platform with their Get Sentry and Sentry repository. So we kind of use that as our initial inspiration before deciding to just open source everything, really.
Nice. Yeah, that's great context. And yeah, to give a little bit of context to the new folks who have joined and are listening in. Hello, this is Supabase Launch Week Day 2. If you're new to Supabase, if you haven't heard about it, give us a little peace sign reaction so we know if you're new here. And yes, Supabase is the open source Firebase alternative, open source relational database built on top of Postgres and many fabulous open source projects. And today we've added another fantastic open source project, which is the Supabase Studio, an open source dashboard for your Postgres database. And yeah, today we also have some sort of Q&A mechanics. So we're testing out this Twitter Spaces as kind of a new space for us, but we'd love for you to ask us questions and we'll answer them throughout and pin them up here. So you can just tweet your questions at us at Supabase and include the hashtag Super Launch Week, so SUPA Launch Week. And we'll pick it up here and we'll answer your questions throughout. All right, back to the scheduled program. The Supabase Studio, what's the tech stack and why have you chosen that tech stack? Maybe Joshin, do you want to kick us off there?
Yeah, sure. So Studio is made out of 3 main building blocks. So firstly, Next.js is great that we can roll in serverless functions and client code together. It keeps things simple for both hosted and self-hosted. Secondly, we also use MobX to handle our global state management, mainly for simplicity and minimal boilerplate code. We all know how it happened with Redux. And finally, for styling, we use both Tailwind CSS, all the team knows Tailwind, and also Supabase UI, which is an ongoing work, also open source and built by Johnny himself, and actually was second product of the week during its own product hunt launch. And also for a side note for authentication, well, we actually made the dashboard before even making authentication, but we're in the midst of migrating from Auth to go through. Coming from the team is working really hard on this, and now everyone gets to see us do this in public.
Nice. All right. Anyone else? Any things on the tech stack? I think. Oh yeah, actually on that, yeah, we are launched on Product Hunt. So if you're new and you've joined in, you can scroll to the first tweet we shared in the top of the space, and we'd love for you to jump over to Product Hunt and give us an upvote there, or we'd love to, give folks this fabulous open source project. Okay. So now that it is open source, has that sort of changed anything internally, in terms of how we're deploying things, or is it really just same old?
Yeah, sure. I could expand on this. So for anyone who's interested or has even looked through GitHub today or yesterday, and has looked through some of the code that we've open sourced, it is actually, for the most part, exactly what we actually deploy to our hosted platform. We deploy the same app completely. It's what you use for self-host. That app is also deployed straight to Vercel, and we use it for our platform. But the things that we did change, because we didn't want to just kind of move it into an open source repo, its own public repo. We wanted to kind of like improve the bits that we knew kind of like were causing problems. And one of them was, Josh mentioned before, we use MobX, and Hugh, it's a shame he's not here because I'm sure he'll love to talk about it, is that Hugh was restructuring all of our MobX stores so that it was easier for any developer to work on it, to basically grab the data you need, or like a UI state. And now we just kind of use a singleton approach. I suppose anyone using MobX might sort of recognize that term. We can just import basically a data store, and all of a sudden in whatever component or page you're working on, you can grab the things that are relevant to whatever you want to show in that bit of the UI. So that's been tremendous that we actually managed to restructure some of that. The other thing that we're looking to do soon is probably use Vercel multi-zones. So anyone who's used Next.js and Vercel, you might have heard of multi-zones. It's so that you can kind of deploy multiple Next.js sites on the same domain. And this is going to be great because, as Joshua mentioned before, we're going to be moving to go true authentication from Auth0. So you get to see us doing that completely in public. So anyone who's interested in migrating a project on Next.js to go true, yeah, please take a look at that. It'll be pretty cool. But the thing is, we're looking to maybe use the same kind of authentication across all of our websites. So on the marketing site, the doc site, and the dashboard, they'll kind of know whether or not you're logged in or not logged in. And so we're kind of using or leveraging multi-zones to kind of be able to do that as well. But other than that, really, it's kind of the same site. And as I say, it's the same site that we deploy to our own hosted platform, which is pretty cool.
Nice. Yeah, that's very exciting. We get a lot of users, kind of wanting to do the whole authentication piece, with Next.js. And so having this example of, a fairly sort of meaty application that uses authentication in Next.js, that's going to be super, super helpful. Now, with open source projects, feedback or collecting feedback is, fairly easy in terms of, anyone can see it, anyone can raise an issue, create an RFC, what have you. Now, previously the dashboard was closed source, now it's open source, but, how kind of throughout, how do you decide what to work on and sort of what features to prioritize? And, will this change now that it's open source, kind of your process there?
Yeah, that's interesting because beforehand, because obviously it was kind of closed, anyone who's kind of used our dashboard, I suppose, you might recognize we have a top right of the dashboard, it says feedback on this page. And so we were using things like that where someone would click on it, they'd fill out the form, it would send us some feedback, and we would kind of like collate all that kind of feedback together internally to kind of like figure out like what things were people struggling on, what things could we maybe improve on. And the thing is, we didn't really know anyone would kind of use these kind of mechanics, and then we ended up kind of collecting, the last I checked, we had 3,000 feedback tickets, which we've read through every single one of them, and we've also replied to some of them. Some people have been quite surprised that we read them and replied to them and like helped them out with the problems that they might have been having. But the problem is that's all kind of happening in a kind of behind closed doors. And I think Koppel kind of mentioned before as well, because we're open sourcing this, we can now kind of like keep like a lot of our like bug reports and GitHub issues can all be in this open repo now in Supabase. And so anyone can kind of like track the progress of them, or even kind of like get involved and maybe like have a go at fixing them themselves as well, which is super exciting. The idea that the same person that actually posts the bug could actually maybe fix it themselves, and we could deploy it on the same day. I mean, that's kind of the dream here, and it's what we've been working towards.
Nice. And we actually have our first community question. I found one here from Lunadesk, and they are asking, are there any plans to expand upon the email templates options within the studio or the dashboard? Would be great to be able to add more triggers and to be able to easily add custom styling. That's interesting. I think that's probably more a question sort of on the auth side of things, although kind of the auth options are exposed in the dashboard. Yeah. Anyone sort of want to jump in on that?
Yeah. So this is actually the biggest thing that open source in the dashboard solves for the auth team, because the auth backend has been open source from the start. It's actually, Netlify originally implemented this project called GoTrue, and we've been just throwing a ton of features on top of that. And the cool thing is, as the whole point of this open source and everything, is that when anyone wants to add a new, let's say, OAuth provider like LinkedIn or Spotify, they can come in and just, contribute it to the back end. But the bottleneck was always just like adding a single field to the dashboard itself to be able to enable that feature within the hosted platform. And it's such a small task. Like, someone's obviously gone to the lengths of implementing like a whole OAuth flow for this new provider, and all they want to do is add a button to the dashboard. But it kind of previously would just get stuck because it's a small change. It might not necessarily be like top priority for the dashboard team, and people in the Auth community just really want that thing. So if this question about templates falls into the same bucket of things that now, anytime something is added to the Auth backend, the same contributor can just move to the dashboard and make that small UI change. And this applies for, I think what the question is about is, adding new variables and new customizations and style. It's now the front end team in Supabase is no longer the bottleneck on these kinds of issues. So I think we'll see the rate of development of the dashboard just really accelerate now over the next few months and hopefully years.
Yeah, I think Harry is now doing cartwheels wherever he is right now. To give you some context, we featured Harry yesterday. They are a developer from the UK, currently in high school because they are 15 years old. That's the beauty of open source. And yeah, thanks again, Harry, for adding Auth providers and yeah, working on some interesting Web3 stuff now, I think, with Ethereum. So that's going to be very exciting.
And also, I mean, there's a shout out. I think so. There is already someone who's contributed to the studio outside of the Supabase team this week. They just must have found that we open sourced it because it's been out there for a week. We just haven't publicized it. And they also are 15 years old. So I don't know what's in the water these days, but these kids are really, smashing it with some of these codes. So it's pretty cool that basically having this studio code open sourced basically unlocks it for anyone to come and contribute.
Would be interesting if it has anything to do with that it's a COVID safe activity in terms of hobby, after school hobby.
Or that or gaming, I guess. So we'd love for more people to get into open source compared to gaming, although, yeah, they're both great.
Indeed. All right. Yeah. Earlier, a couple of you mentioned that, the code was pretty wild and, let's say somewhat difficult to wrap one's head around. How are you feeling about it now? Sort of what's left to do? Johnny, you mentioned, you're excited about refactoring things sort of in the open. But yeah, sort of what's left to do and what's the plan for the future?
Well, I mean, to be perfectly fair, though, when I say the code was pretty wild, I think most of it is, I'm speaking for myself there, like the stuff that I implemented. I think if there's anything wild left over, it's just sort of the remnants of them unplugging my wild code. But I'm sure, yeah, Josh, and you've got a better idea of the code base these days.
Yeah, I mean, I'll share the responsibility for the wild code as well. But for one, there's definitely a lot to clean up and refactor even with the dashboard out in the open now. I mean, for those who've taken a peek at the studio folder in the Supabase repo, we have an entire folder named to be clean with tons of files in it. And in fact, actually, I was initially pretty apprehensive about publicizing the bad code we've got. I think Johnny definitely remembers that over one of the Slack calls. But I think eventually, as a team, we've come to an agreement together that it's kind of part of the open source ethos that we ship something ugly and improve it in public. So now with the dashboard through the doors, everyone gets to watch us build and also be involved. So definitely follow us to stay up to date with what will come next for Studio.
Brilliant. Yeah, and let's see, if there's any new joiners, anyone who hasn't maybe not heard of Supabase yet. Give us a little reaction here. We want some interaction. Give us a little peace sign. Let us know you're new to the party. Lovely to have you. And yeah, Supabase is the open source Firebase alternative. It is open source, it is a great DX, and it is built on top of Postgres and many, many amazing open source projects. And today, as part of Launch Week, which we do every once in a while because we love launching stuff every day of the week. So that's what we're doing at the moment. This is day 2, and we've open sourced the Supabase Studio, the Supabase dashboard that we're using on the hosted platform. You can now put on top of your Postgres database at home if you so want to. And so we're actually doing a little Q&A here. So if you have any questions for the team that has worked on making this open source, do tweet it at Supabase with the Super Launch Week hashtag, and we can pick it up here. But I think at this point, I don't see any new questions. So quickly, if you have any, get them in. Otherwise, we will be on Twitter Spaces every day this week. So tomorrow is day 3. And at the same time tomorrow, 7 a.m. PT, 4 p.m. CET, 11 p.m. Singapore time, we will be here. We will be talking with the real-time team, and there is some exciting stuff shipping tomorrow. Okay, anyone else on the team, anything they want to mention, drop, anything that we might have forgotten? Otherwise, I think we can get cracking on the real-time stuff and prepare that for tomorrow.
Maybe just an update on our product hunt. We're currently climbing through the leaderboard. We've managed to rack up quite a few votes actually just in the last 10 minutes, I think. So if anyone's not been there or thinks, if you think we deserve an upvote, then get over there and upvote. It'll be fantastic. It's really awesome to kind of like see everyone voting on it and leaving their comments.
Yeah, hype is always appreciated. Johnny, I had a question for you actually. So I've known Johnny for many years now and sort of seen him build a lot of different things within different companies. I think in the past you've used different frameworks, like was it Ember.js and even some crazy stuff like Qt for web, like the QML stuff. Like how does the current stack compare to those? Like, because it's not that many years of like progression on the front end, right? What are the differences?
Wow, that's a good point. I think because I remember I think QML was kind of Qt, I guess. It was kind of the first thing we really got to grips with. It was kind of the thing that actually I learned to code on. So rather than learning C++ or maybe JavaScript or something like that, I learned QML, which was kind of like a weird combination of like JavaScript and HTML smacked together, and it didn't make any sense at all. It was horrible. The thing that probably is very obvious now when you look back is that there's so much more emphasis on frameworks that kind of like put together all the bits you need to kind of like deliver a project. So now I think one of the best examples is like Next.js being able to kind of bundle in kind of like your kind of hosting your front end and maybe some serverless functions and things like that. It doesn't give you everything, but it's such a difference from before, where you had to kind of like use all these kind of different services to kind of like get your thing off the ground. And really, when you're going through these startups, you want to be able to put these things together really quickly and get them out and get users using them. And hopefully don't use the strategy of trying to get a user and hiring them instead, because that's not like maybe not the best way of getting a user.
Not sustainable.
Yeah, don't use that approach at all. You will run out of money.
Sample of one, it seemed to work for us, Johnny. So please, I don't know.
Don't mention that they asked me as well. So I mean, the thing is, I mean, this is why I'm excited about Supabase, is because it brings in even more things together, right? So you kind of just need Supabase to have all these things that you need to kind of test a market, or like put a small team together, test a market, and very quickly like hopefully get some users. And really, that's kind of what excites me the most, and it's the biggest difference, I think. It's just having all these things under one roof.
Yeah, and just a follow-up question on that to you, maybe Josh, and also Koppel. Is there an area of the current front end stack that you think is kind of ripe for some advancements? I mean, I just watching from the outside, you do is the improvements still to be had in that, or in some other area that you think is going to change over the next few years?
I heard that the email templates are quite subpar and they need improvement. So yeah, I think that would be one of the first areas I'd recommend contributors look at. I don't know. Yeah, Josh, and you probably have some areas that you feel that you can poke around and spend a few weeks on.
Yeah, definitely. Well, we have really done a huge refactor on the store stuff. There's definitely still things to clean up and make things a lot neater. In fact, like if you check out the folders for the components and pages, I kind of like started writing kind of like a contribution guide as to how we write our code. It's definitely not written in stone yet. It's definitely up for debate and on how we can best write the most readable, legible code that everybody can contribute to. But for a start, the to be clean folder is definitely a place where everyone can jump on to at least aim to keep that folder as small as possible, really.
What about Johnny? Johnny or Josh, and what about tests? How's the test coverage on?
I think we have none.
Okay, so
What?
to be, we don't have tests on the UI, but we've got some tests. So they do exist. They're just not on the dashboard, I guess. This is the tricky thing actually. When you test React code, which changes quite frequently, or like even you change like a little snapshot using Jest, even with Jest, which we use across all our integration tests and everything. I think putting it on the front end, yeah, it's usually a little bit hard. So maybe it's one where if someone's like a really ace with, I don't know, Cypress or something, yeah, well, it's hard to say until we settle on some sort of methodology across everything. But yeah, it'd be one that's interesting to hear people's ideas around that. Maybe they can do an RFC for us in one of our GitHub discussions.
I think we actually had Cypress.
We do, yeah, that's true.
In an early version, but it's just the dashboard changed so fast that the tests were just like out of date basically immediately. But I think now we're probably reaching a point where we've got a bit more stability and can get some stuff down.
We can test that icon sidebar. That only changes every 3 weeks or so. So
actually, I mean, maybe I'm just thinking as well, like how much things have changed. Like things I would love to see in this kind of dashboard is kind of just removing like unnecessary services. So if there's kind of like a serverless function being called, like, does it really need to be called? Is there a way that we can use Supabase JS to kind of like get rid of the API, I suppose? Because with row level security and your Auth policies, you can create such. You don't need that kind of like extra hop on the serverless function. So yeah, things like that. I mean, it's incredible. It's incredible like how much things have changed. But like, I would love to see our dashboard like go in that direction, I suppose.
Maybe as well, like I know that Johnny, you and Joshin have done a lot of stuff on, thinking about the UX, how maybe things are a bit disjointed at the moment between perhaps like a table, the data, the triggers, that kind of, you've got to jump across different areas of the dashboard. So I think you've got some designs and maybe how we might get feedback from the community on how we might change the UX of the dashboard and the UI itself. Have you put any thought into that?
Yeah. I mean, me and Joshin have been kind of like making prototypes in Figma and also in code. Like great like rapid prototypes that Josh has put together as well. It's really amazing, like how fast he did it as well. But obviously it's all happening behind closed doors, so it's kind of like, how can we bring that out and also allow others to kind of like suggest like large kind of UX proposals, I suppose. It goes a little bit beyond obviously like what Supabase probably was originally intended as open source code, but like now it's like, maybe we should open source like our kind of like some of our design processes and get like more people involved. I mean, what do you think, Josh?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, like everyone here is the one that uses our dashboard the most, right? So I would say it's best that we also involve everyone here in the design process, give us some feedback on how to make everything better, how to make everything more streamlined, and that way we can build the best dashboard out there.
The best studio.
Yeah, the studio.
Naming conventions. Thor, I see we've got a couple of questions. Do you want to call them out?
Yes. I think there was one that I added in that is not related to the dashboard, but I found from the community. Does Supabase.js offer support for aggregation functions, sum, average, max? I was looking myself, and I think we've added kind of the count sort of option for Supabase.js to extract the count from the Postgres header request. But it's a good point. I think we're missing some docs there. And then on average and max, I'm actually not sure myself. Do we have like sort of RPC workarounds or?
Yeah, exactly. So if you have any consistent queries to do with aggregations, then you should either, there's two options. You can use a Postgres function, and then you call that using an RPC call, or you can add a Postgres view, and these views will have their aggregations themselves, and then you can query your view. So those are the two options available there.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think we'll need to write up some docs there. Let me make a note of that. And then, okay, Supabase, can you elaborate a little more on the auth switch already? Yeah, actually, maybe should we? Is Kang Ming here? Do we want to drop him in, or what do you think? How does he feel about that?
Yeah, where's Kang Ming?
Ross, do you maybe want to?
I'm trying to find him. I can't see him in the list.
And then when we finally built Supabase Auth, we were just like shipping so many things at once that it was like quite far down the list of actually migrating our own website to even use our own Auth. But now it's about, well, I'll let Kang, if he's available and not in bed yet, maybe give an update on the process.
He probably just popped in to just have a listen.
I've just invited him as a speaker. Hang on.
No, fair enough, but he might be on the web version and not. True. Yeah. So.
Yeah. So basically, it's been 95% done for probably almost a month now, and the kind of blocker was this OSSing of the dashboard. So we wanted to make sure that migration went smoothly and we got all those pieces in place before we do another major change, because obviously something like this touches a lot of different endpoints. There's a lot of security considerations, and we also want to make sure that branch is pen tested by like a professional security company before we roll it out to everyone, basically, because it's, where we host people's data, so it's not sort of something we can just turn on overnight and hope it will be fine.
Hey guys, yeah, I'm still. Yeah, I heard my name being called out, and yeah, so I'll just hop on as well. Yeah, I think it's gonna be great when we migrate over to go through, because it really helps us to dog food our own product, and we probably know how to build go through better. Yeah,
And actually, that's a good point because in the process of doing, we've made some changes to the Auth server already in the process of migrating ourselves, right?
Yeah, we have already added, I think we have spotted some bugs and patched them at the same time. So yeah, that's a good start.
Yeah, and a few of the libraries, I think we added a couple of the functions to the client libraries as well. So really, I mean, it fits our philosophy of dog fooding basically everything. So this one is going to be a great exercise, not just for us and the community or people using us who hopefully, if you're using the dashboard, actually you probably won't even notice. But if you're using the Auth system, Supabase Auth, then I guess you'll benefit from us dog fooding this ourselves.
Yeah, and it'll make our life a lot easier as well, because some of the things on our internal roadmap is to add like role-based access control to our own dashboard. So you can give certain permissions access to the billing and not others, or you can give them read access to the table view, but maybe they shouldn't be able to edit the data directly. Is to do a lot of this stuff within Postgres as well. And then when we've got a really solid schema and model for that, then that's obviously going to be open source, and we can start recommending that to everyone who asks us then about what's the recommended approach to role-based access control with GoTrue and Postgres.
I think we're trying to get Thor back on.
The host has dropped.
He's dropped off. But I think, yeah, well, at this stage, we're kind of, I don't know if Thor is going to get back on. Hopefully he can. But unless there are any questions that Rory promotes, maybe we can call it
We've got
a
him
day.
on. We've got Thor back on to close us out.
So what happened here is I dropped my phone and I dropped off the call. Yeah, so Twitter Spaces, you have to be careful to not accidentally. But I decided to save the can of beer instead of my phone, and so here we are. Anyway, yeah, this was brilliant. I think I'm really loving this, and I'm very happy we're doing this every day of this week. So do join us tomorrow for our chat with the real-time team. Some exciting stuff launching there. And yeah, otherwise do go on Product Hunt, upvote there, make a buzz, retweet the tweets. You're on Twitter already, so it's literally just a tap away. We really appreciate it. Thanks so much for your support and listening in. And yes, see you all tomorrow. Have a lovely day, night, wherever you are. And yeah, test out the dashboard if you haven't already. All right, see us tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. See ya.
Bye.
See ya.
Cheers. Thanks very much.